Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. In the earlier session, we discussed about 50 series related to capital gains head of income, for section 50, 50A, 50B, and 50C also. Also, we have solved some of the questions applying those important provisions of this head of income. Today, let us continue this discussion with some more sections in section 45 series only. Of course, section 45.1 itself was the charging section of this head of income, which we already know. Now, moving on to some other types of situations. One way we can say these are the cases where the year of transfer and year of taxability need not be the same. And we already have discussed the list of such cases. Now the point is we are discussing those things in detail. How to treat such situations, how to deal with such situations, we will discuss in today's session. Starting with 45.1a, which is related to insurance claim, naturally that is received by the SSE on account of the damage or destruction of a capital asset. So first point, is the damage or destruction of a capital asset a transfer? Answer is yes, it is a transfer. Any asset, of course capital asset, if it is damaged or destroyed, that means the asset is gone out of the SSE's hands. It was not sold, it was not exchanged, but that got damaged or destroyed. That is also a transfer when, particularly when such asset is insured with an insurance company and the SSE receives any money or other assets under such insurance from an insurer on account of this damage or destruction of any capital asset. Then, what will be the full value of consideration of such asset because of this transfer? The transfer here is damage. That itself is transfer. That is the event. We can call it as a transfer. But what is the consideration for that transfer? Consideration for that transfer is either the money received or the fair market value of the asset that is received from the insurer. If cash is received, that itself is the full value of consideration. If any other asset is received in exchange of the asset that is destroyed, the fair market value of the asset that is received shall become the full value of consideration of the asset that was destroyed. So this is a definite event that attracts capital gains. It is a transfer. But when this event happens, we have to understand one thing. Transfer happened in one period. Taxability may or may not arise in the same period. That might arise even in the different period. That is the only new point here in this 45.1a. Of course, since the asset is not actually sold, we cannot say it is not a transfer. It is still a transfer, and we know the definition of transfer under section 2 subsection 47 was very broad, and damage or destruction also is considered to be a transfer when such damage happened. Naturally, what kind of damages can happen? We don't need to really by heart it, because damages can happen because of many reasons. That could be due to flood, typhoon, hurricane, cyclone, earthquake, tsunami, whatever it is. Natural causes. Okay, you can call them act of God as per Oh My God or Gopala Gopala. But whatever. That is also a specified damage if such claim is received from the insurer because of this event. Asset damaged or destroyed because of what? It could be anything. All these things are possible. Natural calamities can happen because of which asset might have been damaged. Riots can happen, civil disturbances can happen, accidental fire or explosion can happen, or even there may be action by an enemy, possibly like a war kind of situation, or action taken in combating the enemy, whether with or without declaration of war. So everything is included here. So we don't need to worry about what could cause the damage. Damage is caused generally by these things only. Intentionally nobody will damage their asset. Asset got damaged because of these accidents. any of them is possible to be covered by the insurance claim. That is not the important point. Point here is importantly to be noted is when such asset is destroyed or damaged and when such insurance claim is received, then it becomes taxable under the head of capital gains. But when it is liable to the capital gains in the year of receipt of compensation, not in the year of transfer necessarily. Normally section 45(1) charging section says there should be a transfer and a transfer of a capital asset. That transfer should happen in the previous year and the taxability arises in the year of transfer. That's what charging section said. Naturally this is an exception to that. Here let us say the damage might happen in 1 year. If the compensation is not received in the same year, that will not be taxable in the year of transfer, which is the year of damage. That will become taxable in the year of receipt of compensation. But while discussing this, we have to always keep one thing in mind very clearly. Calculations will happen in the year of transfer only. Means the CII will be taken as per the definition in the numerator for the year of transfer only. Year of transfer, year of taxability need not be same, but the numerator for computing the indexed cost of acquisition or indexed cost of improvement has to be year of transfer. In this case, year of transfer was not previous year, it could be earlier to that. So which CII has to be taken? The cost inflation index. Should we take 289 blindly here? No, we should not. We should really look at what was the year of transfer. Transfer here means damage. Year of damage related inflation index has to be taken in the numerator, and of course if it is different from the year of receipt of compensation. So very important point to be noted, this will almost apply to every such exception where year of transfer and year of taxability are different. In all those cases the logic is same. Calculations will happen in the year of transfer. Taxability will not arise in that year, that's all. Taxability might arise later also, but that does not mean calculations will have to be done for the year of taxability. No, calculations still have to be done for the year of transfer only. Naturally, when the difference will come, particularly when it is a long-term capital asset, and that too when cost inflation index has to be taken, that CII of the year of transfer has to be taken only in the numerator. We should not take the year of taxability. Taxability is different from the year of transfer by virtue of section 45(1)(a). That's all. That does not mean year of taxability is the year of computation of capital gains. Year of computation is different, year of taxability is different. Computation always happens for the year of transfer only. However, it might become taxable in some other year when, in this case, the receipt of compensation might have happened. So, that is a very important point to be noted under section 45(1)(a). Let us look at some of the illustrations or examples related to application of this. Exercise number 16. Mr. A is an individual carrying on business. His stock and machinery were damaged and destroyed in a fire accident in May 2018. So immediately we have to keep in mind that happened in which financial year? 18-19. The value of the stock lost, which was totally damaged, was 6,50,000. That was the value of the stock lost. Certain portion of the machinery could be salvaged, and the opening WDV of the block as on 1st April 2018 was rupees 10,80,000. That was the opening WDV of the block. That is a depreciable asset naturally because it is machinery. Stock is different. That is a stock in trade. It is not a capital asset. Machinery might be a capital asset also, but it is a depreciable asset. And during the process of safeguarding the machinery in the firefighting operations, Mr. A lost his gold chain also and a diamond ring also. So he was very busy in firefighting operations. While doing that, unfortunately, he lost his gold chain also and diamond ring also, which he had purchased earlier in April 2013 for 1,20,000 rupees, which means that is a capital asset. Naturally, gold chain and diamond ring are jewelry. They cannot be called personal assets. They are not personal effects. So it is a capital asset. But which year that was purchased? Both of them in 2013-14. Market value of these items on the date of fire accident was 2 lakhs. That is completely useless. Why do we care about it? That doesn't matter to us. Unnecessary information will be fed to us. We have to be very careful whether it is useful or not. We have to identify it carefully. Mr. A received the following amounts from the insurance company on 4/4/19. That means during our previous year 2019-20, in the month of April, he has received these compensations. So the point is, taxability wise, these things will arise in the year when such compensation is received. That is for sure. However, computations will not happen for the previous year 2019-20. Taxability happens in 19-20. Computation happens for the previous year 18-19. That has to be kept in mind while solving this. Of course, what is the compensation received? One of them, each of them, if you see, towards loss of stock, it is 4,80,000. Is this capital gains? First of all, when any compensation is received towards loss of stock, will that be capital gains? No, it is not. It is not a capital asset, first of all. So it will be a PGBP item. Of course, if the deduction for 6,50,000 was not claimed in the earlier year as a loss, then definitely the actual loss will be claimed as deduction under PGBP for the previous year 19-20. So let us take these items one by one, how the treatment has to be. We are talking about exercise number 16. First thing first, stock in trade. Okay. Compensation received is how much? Compensation received is 4,80,000 rupees. Okay, fine. But what was the cost of those items or the value of those items which were damaged totally given in the question? 6,50,000. So how much is the loss? Actual loss is how much? 1,70,000. That will be treated as a business loss. That will be allowed as deduction. If you remember the provisions in PGBP, for any kind of losses which are incidental to business, they can be claimed as deduction. This is a loss incidental to business. So 1,70,000 rupees loss can be claimed as deduction under the head of PGBP. That's what you should write. That is about first scenario. Of course, other possibility is there. What if he has already claimed 6,50,000 as a deduction because it was a loss in the last year? Then 4,80,000 becomes taxable now. Then section 41 will be attracted because he has claimed a deduction already. Now that the situation of that deduction has reversed because he recovered some amount from the insurance company, then 4,80,000 will be taxable under the head of PGBP if entire 6,50,000 was already claimed as deduction in the previous year 18-19 or assessment year 19-20. If not, freshly what has to be treated? Now for the assessment year 2021 or previous year 19-20, there is a business loss of 1,70,000 which can be claimed as deduction under the head of PGBP. That is about stock in trade treatment. Next, let us look at how much compensation is received towards the machinery. For this, we should first of all know whether it is a depreciable thing or is there a capital gain or loss, something like that. So what was the opening WDV of the machinery on 1/4/2018? Already 10,80,000. Compensation received is only 6 lakhs. So once again, compensation received is 6 lakhs, whereas cost of acquisition or cost of improvement in case of depreciable assets will be nothing but opening WDV plus purchases. No purchases are given, so let us just call it as cost of acquisition or cost of improvement. That was 10,80,000 at the beginning of the 2018 year. Of course, this calculation is done when? It is done in the previous year 2018-19. But still, that was not claimed as that in the previous year 2018. That will have a treatment, tax treatment in the previous year 19-20. What is the treatment? That is short-term capital loss. Short-term capital loss is there. How much? 4,80,000. That's it. That is about machinery. Now moving on to gold chain and diamond ring. This is a proper capital asset. This has to be computed as per normal capital gains related situation. So first we will take full value of consideration. How much is the full value of consideration here? 2 lakhs. That is the compensation received from the insurance company towards this gold chain as well as diamond ring. 2 lakhs is the compensation. But what was the cost of acquisition originally? 1,20,000. Here we have to be careful while providing or calculating the indexation. So while calculating the indexation, we should take the year of transfer in the numerator and we should take the year of acquisition in the denominator. So let us quickly go through the index numbers which are there anyway. So 1,20,000 into year of transfer is what? It is not 1920, it is 1819. So numerator will be how much now? 280. So that is a variety. 289 is not a guaranteed numerator always. In this case it is not 289. In this case it is 280 numerator, that is the year of transfer. Then what is denominator? That depends upon the year of acquisition. What is the year of acquisition? That was acquired, these two things, gold chain and diamond ring, in 2013-14. 2013-14, how much is the index number? That we should look at. 13-14 index number looks like 220 rupees. That's all. That is the indexed cost of acquisition of this. 1,20,000 into 280 divided by 220. That comes to 1,52,727. 1,52,727 is the indexed cost of acquisition. If you reduce it from 2 lakhs, which was full value of consideration, long-term capital gain is 47,273. That is the answer for third bit, where gold chain and diamond ring were lost and insurance claim has been received on that. How much is the long-term capital gain? 47,273. So there is a short-term capital loss of 4,80,000 and a long-term capital gain of 47,273 and a business loss of 1,70,000 can also be claimed as reduction during this year, that is previous year 1920, because taxability arises in our previous year or assessment year 2020-21. However, computation should happen in accordance with the data which is available for the previous year 18-19, not for 19-20. For example, you cannot provide a depreciation for the year 18-19 also. Not possible, because the block itself does not exist. It's gone. So we cannot provide depreciation for that year. Of course, if you say that some machinery was there, could be salvaged, but what is that? Is it really a sufficient portion of the machinery and all? That we don't know. Depends upon what is the magnitude of that. But keeping that apart, though the machinery was damaged in 2018-19, since the compensation is received in 2019-20, the tax treatment will arise in the year 2019-20. That is how the solution for this question, exercise number 16, can be taken as. Now, let us move on to another question, question number 17, exercise number 17. SSC, being a company carrying on a business of manufacture and sale of silk cloth, purchased a machinery worth 7 lakhs rupees on 1/5/2015 and insured it with the United India Assurance Company against fire, flood, earthquake, etc. Depreciation was 15% for each assessment year. Insurance policy contained a reinstatement clause requiring the insurance company to pay the value of the machinery as on the date of fire, etc. in case of destruction or loss. A fire broke out in August 2019, causing extensive damage to the machinery of the SSC, rendering them totally useless. The SSC company received a sum of 6 lakhs rupees from the insurance company on 15th March 2020, that is our previous year. Discuss the issues arising on account of the transaction and their tax treatment. So that was question number 17. So only main point here is we should just find out the opening WDV of the asset from the information that is given. because originally the asset was purchased for 7 lakhs rupees. When was that? In the year 15-16. So 2015-16, 16-17, 17-18 depreciation has to be provided. 18-19 asset is gone. So 18-19 we should not provide depreciation. Though taxability or deductibility of the loss will not arise in 18-19, it might arise in 19-20, but still for 18-19 no depreciation should be provided. And first of all, what is the opening written down value of this asset on 1/4/2018, which is the year of transfer? First of all, we have to always keep in mind year of transfer is different from year of taxability. Year of transfer only calculations have to be happening. Just taxability will be different. That's it. Other than that, no other additional calculation should be done. Only taxability will be different. That happens in other year, some other year. That's all. So year of transfer is 18-19. So naturally, beginning WDV at the beginning of 2018-19, how much is that? We should calculate. Just do that. 7 lakhs minus 15%, minus 15%, minus 15%. So 3 years, if you deduct 15% on written down value method, then it will be 4 lakhs 29,888. 429,888 will be the opening WDV of the asset on 1/4/2018. That itself is the cost of acquisition or cost of improvement, because it's a depreciable asset. How much is the compensation that is received? Compensation received is 6 lakhs minus the opening WDV of the asset is 4,29,888, which means there is a short-term capital gain of 1,70,112. That is short-term capital gain, taxable in which year? Assessment year 2021. Assessment year, taxable, but computed for which year? For the previous year 18-19. That is the care we have to take. Always, when we calculate these type of situations, which are exceptional cases, from 45(1) they deviate. Year of transfer is different, year of taxability is different. Nothing great to seriously remember in that simple point. Calculations should happen for the year of transfer, whatever it is. Taxability will happen in the year of receipt of compensation, whatever it is. That's all. There ends the matter. That was 45(1)(a). Now, another situation like this, only similar to this, but transaction is completely different. Similar in what sense? Year of transfer, year of taxability are not necessarily one and the same. Not necessarily one and the same. Since they are not necessarily one and the same, calculations will happen for the year of transfer, taxability will happen in some other year. That is the only point. Logic is same. But the transaction is different. What is the transaction here? Conversion of capital asset into stock and trade. Whenever a capital asset is converted into a stock and trade, first of all, is it a transfer? Yes, it is a transfer. It was very clearly defined in section 247 as a transfer. So it is a transfer. And it will be treated as a transfer, and of course capital gains will be computed in the previous year in which such conversion takes place by taking fair market value of that asset as full value of consideration. Because he did not receive any consideration, actually speaking. He just converted the asset into stock and trade. What money he received? Nothing. But that is a transfer. That is a taxable event. We have to calculate first, at least capital gains. Taxability and all comes later. But how to calculate that? We have to calculate by taking fair market value of that asset on the date of conversion as full value of consideration. Of course, whatever the original cost of acquisition of that asset would be, that will be anyway deducted. We get whatever the capital gains, short term or long term, depending upon period of holding of that asset. Calculations are all same. But only point to note here is in which year we have to compute that. In the year in which the conversion taken place. And what is the full value of consideration? It is the fair market value of such assets. That is a point to be noted under section 45(2). However, once again, since it is also an exception, tax shall be paid in the year in which such converted stock and trade is sold. That means taxability will not arise in the year of transfer. Tax liability also will not arise in the year of transfer. It will arise only in the year in which such converted stock in trade is sold. Naturally, that is fair. Why? Because when the SSE has just converted the capital asset into stock in trade, he did not receive anything. Though it is a transfer according to 247, though it is taxable, but still there is no money that the SSE has received. So it would not be fair to ask him tax on the money that he did not even receive. That is why we just calculate capital gains in that year when the transfer takes place and keep it there. That's all. That is not taxable. We just calculate it by taking the CII of the year of conversion. But taxability of that arises in the year when the converted stock in trade is actually sold. That might happen at a later stage. That is what is 45.2. Very, very important provision. This also special questions can be definitely asked on this, because once again it covers two heads of income. Why is that? Because when the stock in trade is sold, that also will attract PGBP. So there will be PGBP also in the year when the stock in trade is sold. There will be capital gains also, which was already calculated earlier in the year of conversion, but becomes taxable now when the stock in trade is actually sold. So two heads of income covered in one shot. That is why it becomes very important provision. 45.2. Look at the data here in exercise number 18. X converts his capital asset acquired on 10th June 1998 for 40,000, which was before 1/4/2001. Fair market value on 1/4/2001 is given as 80,000. So naturally we will take 80,000. That 40,000 is useless. Whichever is higher only we have to take. But that capital asset, whatever was that is converted into stock and trade on 10th March 2016. Be careful with the years. Which year it was converted? Financial year 15-16 it was converted. So first we have to identify the facts of the case very carefully for exercise number 18. What is the cost of acquisition? 80,000. Year of conversion is 2015-16. That has to be, first of all, be very clear. It is not 16-17, it is 15-16. 10th March 2016. Fair market value is 14,80,000. Of course, that will be taken as full value of consideration. And then subsequently sells the stock and trade so converted for 17,30,000 on 10th June 2019, naturally during our previous year. State the tax implications. We'll come to capital gains later. First, let us quickly find out PGBP, that is easiest one. So, how much will be PGBP or business income in this case? The stock in trade is sold for 17,30,000, and what was the fair market value already, which would have been taxable under capital gains? 14,80,000. So, the difference between actual sale value of stock in trade minus fair market value will be PGBP. So, 17,30,000 minus 14,80,000 will be 2,50,000, taxable as business income. This is one thing, keep it aside. Taxable in which year? Naturally in the year when it is sold. That means assessment year 2020-21 only. This is taxable as PGBP. Now, coming to capital gains, calculations will happen for the year 2015-16. Taxability will arise for the assessment year 2021. That is the only variety. But once again, taxability is only something that is a one liner, it is enough. Computations will happen according to CII of the year 2015-16. What was the full value of consideration when the conversion of capital asset into stock and trade happened? 14,80,000. Year of conversion is the year of transfer. Deduct indexed cost of acquisition. Indexed cost of acquisition, how much? We have to take 80,000. That is one provision we have to apply because the asset was acquired before 1/4/2001. Fair market value on 1/4/2001 or actual cost of acquisition, whichever is higher, has to be taken. So 80,000 is taken. Once again, main point here is numerator. Numerator, which year we have to take? Should we take 289 blindly? No. We should take the CII of the year 2015-16. That comes to 254. So 254 is the numerator. Denominator is easy because acquisition was prior to 1/4/2001. Denominator will be always 100. So 80,000 into 254 by 100. 2 lakhs 3,200 was the indexed cost of acquisition, which means long term capital gain is taxable to the extent of 12 lakhs 76,800. That's it. 12 lakhs 76,800 is long term capital gain. Of course, taxable in which year? Taxable in the assessment year 2020-21. Though we calculated it for the calculation purposes, we took the year of transfer as a basis. Taxability purposes, it is different. Taxability happens in the assessment year 2021 only, because that is the year in which the stock in trade so converted has actually been sold. That was question number or exercise number 18. Now let's move on to exercise number 19. Pritish, who owns 9 acres of land near Chennai since July 2003, purchased for 12 lakhs rupees, commenced real estate business from April 2009 and introduced this land as his capital. So years are very important. Year of acquisition, let us just write them first of all. Year of acquisition is 2003-4. Year of conversion is what? That is 2009-10. Then naturally year of transfer will be always our previous year. Transfer in the sense actual sale and taxability will be our previous year. We'll see that later. And introduced this land as his capital into his real estate business in the year 2009-10. Fair market value of the land on the date of commencement of business was 75 lakhs. However, the value of such land has been recorded at 80 lakhs in the books of accounts of the business. That is the point. Once again, unnecessary information. As per the provision of section 45(2), what should be taken as full value of consideration? Only fair market value. What amount is taken in the books of accounts is immaterial. So fair market value is only relevant here. Whatever the amount they write in the books of account, they can write anything, that is their whims and fancies. That will not be relevant for us. Only 75 lakhs will be taken as full value of consideration for such conversion, which was a transfer which happened during the year 2009-10. Then the entire land after development and conversion into housing plots was sold for 135 lakhs between September 2019 and February 2020, naturally during our previous year. Expenses incurred for project development were 37 lakhs. Are the business expenses? Of course, yes. 135 lakhs is the sale value of the stock and trade. Expenses for the project development are 37 lakhs. Advise him as to the taxability of income and under what heads and in which assessment years. That is the point. Year of taxability definitely is 2000. These are all years, previous years. Year of taxability in the sense we are talking about assessment year. Assessment year of taxability will be 2020-21, which will be naturally our assessment year. First, let us focus on business income, PGBP. PGBP simple. How much is the sale value, revenue? That is 135 lakhs, okay. Minus, what was the expenses for development? 37 lakhs. Minus, what would have been already taxed under capital gains? Fair market value on the date of conversion, 75 lakhs. 80 is immaterial, that doesn't matter to us. Whatever is taken here, earlier in the capital gains, as full value of consideration, that will be taken now as a reduction here, and the excess of that will be treated as PGBP. So 135 lakhs minus 37 lakhs minus 75 lakhs, 23 lakhs is what? That is PGBP income during the assessment year 2021. Now, coming to capital gains, which actually should be calculated for the year 2009-10. Though it is taxable for the assessment year 2021, calculations should happen for the assessment for the previous year 2009-10. Full value of consideration, naturally 75 lakhs. That is the fair market value we are talking. Deduct indexed cost of acquisition, since it is a long-term capital asset. What was the indexed cost of acquisition? 12 lakhs is the original value that the asset was purchased for, multiplied with year of transfer, very important. not 289. Year of transfer or year of conversion, both are same. That is 2009-10. When it is 2009-10, what was the CII for 2009-10? 148. Write it clearly. 148 is the numerator. That is the year of transfer or year of conversion. But what was the year of acquisition? 2003-4. 2003-4 CII has to be taken. 3-4 CII is 109. Then calculations you can do. 12 lakhs into 148 divided by 109. That comes to 16 lakhs 29,358. That is the indexed cost of acquisition. So naturally, what is this? Long-term capital gain. How much is the long-term capital gain? 75 lakhs minus 1629,358. 58 lakhs 70,642. 58 lakhs 70,642 is the long-term capital gain. Once again, computed using data related to 2009-10, but taxability arises for the assessment year 2021 only. So PGBP 23 lakhs also, long-term capital gain 58 lakhs 70,642 also, both of them are taxable for the assessment year 2020-21 only. That is the application of section 45(2), conversion of capital asset into stock in trade. Then the next point we already discussed also. What if conversion of stock in trade happened into capital asset? That will be actually considered as PGBP. When stock in trade is converted into capital asset, that will be treated as PGBP first of all, but while doing so, what will be taken as PGBP? The fair market value of the inventory as on the date on which it is converted into is treated as a capital asset, is considered as PGBP. In the sense, it will be taxable under PGBP. That does not mean already its original cost was not recorded. It would have been already recorded. So now, when the stock in trade is converted into capital asset, that will be treated as revenue of that year in which such conversion has taken place as PGBP. However, after that, if the capital asset is sold later, then what? Then the fair market value which was already considered as PGBP, that will be taken as cost of acquisition of such a capital asset later. For example, let us say there is a stock in trade which is originally already there in our books. A stock in trade means already we purchased it or manufactured, we have it already in our books as a cost. So let us say stock in trade worth 20 lakhs already has been converted into capital asset in some year, say 2018-19 year, it was converted into capital asset. Stock in trade was converted into capital asset. Fair market value of that on the date of conversion, let us say, was 35 lakhs. Already there was a cost which was recorded. Now this 35 is treated as revenue. Naturally, this difference will be treated as PGBP in the year of conversion. That has happened already. There is no postponement there. That happens immediately. That is not going to be postponed till the capital asset is sold immediately. So that is considered as PGBP in the year of conversion itself. But now this capital asset is sold in the year 2019-20, let us say, for 50 lakhs. Then what? Then 50 lakhs is full value of consideration. What is the cost of acquisition? 20 or 35? It should be 35 naturally, because already 35 has been taken as revenue under the head of PGBP. So how much will be taxable now under capital gains? Maybe this is short term without indexation and all, just for understanding. 15 lakhs could be taken as short term capital gains by taking 35 lakhs as if it is the cost of acquisition. So that is the point here. When the capital asset is sold now, which was not originally acquired, but rather it was converted from stock in trade into capital asset in an earlier year, wherein already the fair market value of such capital asset would have been taxable under PGBP. Now, when that capital asset is sold, cost of acquisition of that capital asset has to be taken to be the fair market value of the capital asset, which was already taken as into consideration for purpose of PGBP calculation earlier. That's it. that is conversion of stock and trade into capital asset. Not that is not capital gains transaction. Selling that capital asset is capital gains transaction. Always that is why we have to be looking at the entire story of anything. One level we will not understand anything. We have to go backwards what happened earlier. Capital asset is sold now. So what? That is okay. But what type of capital asset is sold now? That is a capital asset which was earlier some time back converted from stock and trade into capital asset. Then what is the cost of acquisition of such capital asset? Whatever was taken as full value of whatever was taken as fair market value of that capital asset or stock and trade, whatever it may be, on the date of conversion earlier for the purpose of PGBP, that itself will be considered as cost of acquisition now when that capital asset is actually sold. That's it. Now let us enter into some of the special type of situations which are related to shares. Very, very important, as I told already. For a capital gains problem, broad level, not that these are the only things, any type of problem can come. Slump sale can be asked, liquidation can be asked, any of them, conversion of stock and trade into capital asset can be asked, or conversion of capital asset into stock and trade can be asked. All these things are possible. But at a broader level, if you see, if for a normal purchase sale type of transaction, there could be only two possibilities. One is immovable property, land or building, or both. Second is shares, which is one of the most important capital assets for this chapter for problems purposes. So all the things, provisions related to shares naturally will be very, very important. Of course, the shares here we are talking about are not those which are held as stock and trade. We are talking about those people who are holding these shares as investments. When there is a transfer of shares that is happening, which were originally acquired as bonus shares. What was the cost of acquisition of bonus shares? Did we pay anything when we purchased them? No. So naturally the bonus shares cost of acquisition should be taken as nil. That's it. That is the provision very clear about. However, there is a variety point. If the bonus shares were acquired before 1/4/2001, then the cost of acquisition of such bonus shares shall be taken as fair market value as on 1/4/2001. That is a very, very crucial important provision. Whenever we look at bonus shares, we have to see when those were acquired and allotted. When? If it is after 1/4/2001, cost of acquisition of bonus shares is simply nil because we did not pay anything. But if those bonus shares were acquired prior to 1/4/2001, then cost of acquisition of those bonus shares can be taken as fair market value of those shares on 1/4/2001. That's all. That is related to bonus shares. Why and all we cannot ask. That is a provision. Then, another important point, of course not really for us, mostly for practical purposes, transfer of securities through depository. See, normally in the stock exchange transactions, when there is a buyer and seller directly will not have any deal. So some Rajesh has sold some shares, Suresh has purchased some shares through a stock exchange. Rajesh, Suresh never know each other also. They cannot actually have any kind of interaction with each other also. There is some third party in between them. That is the exchange, and after the deal or purchase and sale has been done, then the same transaction goes through a separate party called as a depository. That means what? Legally speaking, technically speaking, very strictly speaking, the seller has not sold the shares to the buyer. He has sold the shares to the depository. And same way, technically speaking, very strictly looking by the transactional nature, the buyer has not purchased the shares from the seller directly. He has purchased it from depository. Depository is the intermediary between the buyer and seller. So that is what actually, very strictly if you look at the transaction. But is it real? No, it is not. So naturally, we cannot say depository is the person who should pay capital gains. He is only acting like an intermediary between the buyer and seller. So that is why profits or gains arising from the transfer of securities made by depository shall be chargeable to tax as the income of whom? The beneficial owner. Depository is never the beneficial owner. He is only one of the intermediary players between the buyers and sellers. So that is why whoever is the beneficial owner of the shares who sold it, he will be the person for whom the capital gains have to be calculated. That is quite natural. Of course, they should not be treated as income of the depository. Legally, document wise, if you see, contracts wise, if you see, that will be like that. The documentation will be like that. So, somebody X sold shares to Y, there will not be any contract between X and Y. There will not be any documentation between X and Y, actually speaking. X will sell the shares to depository, Y will buy the shares from depository. So there will be a contract between X and depository, and there will be a contract between Y and depository. So just because of that, should depository be asked to pay tax? Is he the beneficial owner? No. X was the beneficial owner who got the capital gains. So naturally, capital gains will be subjected to tax in the hands of seller, real seller, not the depository. That's a practical point we have to keep in mind. And another practical problem also will come, because nowadays most of the shares are all in demat form, that is dematerialized form, which are electronic form. Electronic form, it is there. If it is a physical form, there is no big issue. Share certificates will have their numbers. Let us say maybe 20-30 years back, when physical share certificates were there, some shareholder purchased so-called share certificate number 12568 for 1000 rupees and he sold it for 2000 rupees. We know exactly which number of share certificate along with a unique number on that. We can identify which share has been purchased and which share has been sold. So sale and purchase can be tracked when the share certificates were physical. We can say for convenience and understanding purposes, something like inventories, specific identification was possible earlier when physical share certificates were there. What was purchased and at what time and what price it was sold for can be easily identified when old days, long back. Now, almost since maybe more than 20 years at least, shares are all being sold in demat form. In the sense, there is no one unique number that is there for the share. So shares are all coming in and going out. Somebody is buying shares and selling shares. When he sold the shares, which share he sold? How do we know? So naturally the same problem that we encounter for inventories will arise here also. Then, according to the Income Tax Act, Section 45(2)(a), we have to follow FIFO basis only. You have to keep this in mind very well. Because in accounts, according to Accounting Standard 13, investment accounts particularly, FIFO also can be used, weighted average also can be used. Boss, that is accounts, keep it there. That is different. Income tax never allowed weighted average and all. Income Tax Act said you have to calculate the gain or loss only using FIFO basis. In other words, whatever the securities that you purchased, the oldest, it is deemed that those are the ones which are sold first now. That is the basic assumption for computation of capital gains when shares are purchased and sold through dematerialized form or demat form in electronic form. So what is the basis to be used? FIFO. Only FIFO. Law says FIFO means it is FIFO only, nothing else. Accounting Standard 13 said weighted average. Yes, it will tell 100 things. That is good. We have to apply it when we use it for accounting purposes, which is completely a different subject. So that is one of the points I always tell. Never try to mix up the things between accounts and taxation. Taxation, when it says something as a law, it has to be just followed according to that. Of course, accounting will tell also something according to some accounting standard, and that will be also followed. But that will be followed in books of accounts. Taxation is a different concept and a topic altogether. So here, always the calculations have to be done on FIFO basis when the purchase and sale of securities is happening in dematerialized form. Very important practical issue. Then, what about rights shares? Rights shares. Sometimes companies will issue rights shares to their shareholders. And are we talking about from company's point of view here or shareholders' point of view? We are looking at shareholders' point of view. Who is the guy who is selling all these shares? Shareholder. How is he selling? He is selling normally. But when did he purchase them? If he normally purchased it, there is no big deal. We don't have to look at all these things. Sale price minus purchase price, profit, that is capital gain. Done. No, that is not the case here. Sometimes the shares could have been acquired by way of ESOP. We know that how to treat. Sometimes the shares might have been obtained by way of consideration in a transaction of amalgamation. We discussed that. Sometimes shares might have been acquired as a conversion of some other security into shares. Possible. Sometimes shares could have been acquired by way of demerger. Possible. So many possibilities are there. Shares need not be just purchased and sold. That is one of them, but not necessarily the only thing. So shares might have been obtained by bonus shares also. Then the cost of acquisition should be taken as nil. However, if bonus shares are acquired before 1/4/2001, then fair market value on 1/4/2001 should be taken as cost of acquisition. That is a special scenario. Bonus shares only. Now rights shares. Rights shares are those where the companies will issue fresh equity share capital to the existing shareholders before they issue them to the public. In legal terms, that is called a right of preemption. That is a preemptive right of the existing shareholders to get offered the shares from the company before the same shares are being offered to the public. That preemptive right is there with the shareholders, so we are calling it as right shares, because that is a right. It's not just some companies doing some favor to the shareholders. Because of company law, not only in India, almost throughout the world, everywhere, these provisions are there, where existing shareholders have to be given the first priority whenever a new issue of shares happens. After existing shareholders have been issued with right shares only, if there is anything that is left, the share capital which could not be subscribed by the existing shareholders, that can be issued to public for an existing company, naturally, not a new company. So, if such right shares were subscribed by the existing shareholder, is it something free? No, it is not. So there is no big deal about it. Whatever the cost of acquisition of that particular right shares is there, that itself will be taken as cost of acquisition. So simple point. Nothing special or nothing great here. There is a real money that the shareholder is paying. It is not like bonus shares. So what is his cost of acquisition? Whatever money he paid, that is the cost of acquisition. So where the shares are issued at concessional rate to the existing shareholders, by virtue of their holding a share in any others or any other security, then such shares are called as right shares. Hopefully we all should know that already. These shares are not issued free of cost, of course, yes. That is why cost of acquisition of right shares shall be what? The amount that is actually paid by the SSC for acquiring such right shares. So rights shares acquisition, whatever the amount that SSC pays while subscribing for those shares, that itself will be the cost of acquisition. Nothing special. But there is something else that is special here, that is related to the rights entitlement. Rights shares is different, rights entitlement is different. Even the company offers the rights shares to the existing shareholders, is there any rule or compulsion that every existing shareholder should subscribe for rights shares? No, there is no rule. But will the existing shareholders have a right to renounce their right in favor of somebody? Then yes, that is called the right of renunciation. That is also a right. So when the right shares are offered by the company, the shareholders have two choices. One, subscribe for the shares. Two, renounce that right in favor of somebody else. What that shareholder gets by renouncing that rights entitlement in favor of somebody else? Naturally money. Let us say in the market, share price is 100 rupees. Right shares are now being offered only at say 70 rupees. So there is a benefit that shareholder might get for 30 rupees, but he doesn't want to pay that 70 rupees also. Maybe he doesn't have money to pay that 70 rupees. So what he can do? He can sell this right. Be careful. He is not selling the share. He is selling his right. That is what is rights entitlement to somebody else. Of course, nobody will buy it for more than 30 rupees. Let us say somebody agreed to buy it for 20 rupees for understanding purposes. Then the shareholder, existing shareholder, has sold his rights entitlement for 20 rupees. That's what is selling off rights entitlement. So what is it taxable as? Of course it is taxable under the head of capital gains only. So when an SSE who has been offered right shares by the company can endorse his right, we call the names endorse, renounce, legal name is renunciation, that is the best word. So when the rights entitlement is renounced in favor of somebody else, third party, then such endorsement of right is called as right of renouncement, and the right to acquire the shares is called as rights entitlement. Since such right entitlement is acquired freely by virtue of current shareholding only, the cost of acquisition of such rights entitlement shall be taken as nil. Did shareholder pay any extra money to get this entitlement? No. This entitlement he got it because of Companies Act. Automatically he got it. He did not pay anything extra for getting this rights entitlement. He got this entitlement which he transferred now. So now, in our example, 20 rupees is what the shareholder has got by renouncing his rights entitlement. Entire 20 rupees will be taxable under the head of capital gains, but there is no cost of acquisition for that. That is why cost of acquisition shall be taken as nil. For rights entitlement, mainly in the examination questions, you have to be very careful with distinction between rights shares and rights entitlement. Both are not same. Rights shares are those which are subscribed by the existing shareholder. Rights entitlements are those which are not subscribed by the existing shareholder. Rather, the existing shareholder renounced them in favor of somebody else. So, when there is a transfer of rights shares, whatever the money he gets, that is the full value of consideration, that is reality. What is the cost of acquisition of rights shares? Whatever the real money that the shareholder has paid at the time of acquisition. However, for the rights entitlement, there is no cost of acquisition. That is why cost of acquisition shall be taken as nil. Now, because the topic has come, let us extend it to another point, because this can be also there in a MCQ question. It is not supposed to be separately discussed, not necessarily common sense thing, but still questions can be asked on this. Now we talked about a person who has renounced his right in favor of somebody, and as we talked about, he renounced it at a price of 20 rupees. Let us say X has renounced his right to buy the right shares to Y for a price of 20 rupees. So Y purchased the right for 20 rupees. Is Y going to keep it in a safe? No. He has to use that. What he purchased, he did not purchase a share. First understand that. From X point of view also, Y point of view also, we have to always distinguish between share and right. What Y purchased? He purchased the rights entitlement, not shares itself. With that entitlement, what he can do? He can apply for the shares of that so-called company which has issued these right shares at a price of 90 rupees only, not 100 rupees, which might be whatever the market price may be. So now, if the rights issue price is 70 rupees and this person Y has purchased the right for 20 rupees, what is his total cost of acquisition of those shares? 70 or 90? Answer is 90, because he paid 70 rupees to company to buy the right shares, and he paid to X 20 rupees in order to first of all obtain that right to subscribe for rights issue. Both are his cost of acquisitions. So that is also another next level of transaction we have to also keep in mind. For the buyer of rights entitlement, the cost of rights entitlement also should be added to the cost of acquisition of the rights shares. So that is the other side of the story. That also has to be kept in mind. That is about the story of rights shares subscribed and rights shares not subscribed but renounced the rights entitlement in favor of somebody else. Now let us do some of the exercises related to this shares related questions. Exercise number 20. A purchased 1200 equity shares in Victory Limited, whatever that company may be, at the rate of 15 rupees per share on 11th December 2014, and he got 300 bonus shares by virtue of his holding of these shares on 21st January 2016. On March 7th 2020, A transfers all the 1500 shares at a rate of 84 rupees per share. Compute the capital gains. Of course, the transfer will always happen during our previous year, then only some capital gains is there, right? So here, ideally, whenever there are shares related questions, I suggest you make as many columns as there are number of categories of shares. Whether it is really useful or not, that may change, but still we can make it a habit that presentation can be done like this. Let us say original shares, and let us say bonus shares. First of all, number of shares, you write it separately. Number of shares originally how many? 1200 shares. Okay, fine. And bonus shares are how many? 300 bonus shares. That means they would have issued 1:4 type of bonus shares. For every 4 shares held, 1 share might have been issued as bonus shares. Done already, company has done this already. But also write the year of acquisition. These are facts only from the question. What was the year of acquisition of original shares? 11th December 2014 means 2014-15. What is the year of acquisition of bonus shares? 21st January 2016 means 2015-16. Acquisition of bonus shares is not the same. Now you understand why we have to write 2 columns, because indexation will be different naturally. For 2014-15 indexation is different, for 15-16 indexation is different. Okay, it's a different story. Bonus shares will not have any cost of acquisition. Anyway, it will be 0. But still, imagine if it is right shares, then there will be something. So that is why, as a matter of presentation, always keep original and bonus and rights 3 popular categories. In this case, there is no right shares. So let us not get into that. Only these 2 categories are there. 2 columns can be presented in the answer. Year of acquisition is also clear. So this is about the fact. Now, full value of consideration. How many shares? 1200 shares sold at 84 rupees per share. So 1200 into 84 means 1,08,000 is the total full value of consideration of selling of original shares. Then 300 into 84, that is the sale value of bonus shares. That will be 25,200. If you want a total column, you can have that also if time permits. Otherwise, it's okay, no problem. Then full value of consideration is there, 84 rupees per share. Then we have to deduct indexed cost of acquisition. Definitely it is a long-term capital asset because it's held for more than 12 months. Limited means normally we should assume it is a listed share. Even if it is not listed also, it is more than 24 months. So no problem. Definitely it is a long-term capital asset. We have to calculate indexed cost of acquisition for original shares first. How much was the original purchase price? 15 rupees per share. That means 18,000 rupees was the original cost of acquisition, which is 1200 into 15. Multiplied with, year of transfer is okay here, 289. Divided by what? Year of acquisition, 1415. That will be helpful for us here. 1415 is 240. That's it. You can write that with the calculation. So 18,000 into 289 divided by 240. That will be 21,675. Now, bonus shares cost of acquisition is how much? Nil, naturally, because those are acquired after 1/4/2001. Bonus shares cost of acquisition is nil. He did not pay anything for that. He just got them free. So nothing is there as cost of acquisition. Then find out long-term capital gain. For that purpose also you have to segregate. Bonus shares are long-term or short-term here. Incidentally, they are long-term, but not necessarily always. Maybe original shares are long-term, but bonus shares are short-term. That is another reason why we need a better presentation of 2 different columns. Whether it is finally useful or not, make it a habit. For shares related questions in capital gains, each category of shares you have 1 column for calculation. That will be the best way of presentation. That will be convenient also. So 1,08,000 minus 21,675, 79,125 is the long-term capital gain from the sale of original shares. 25,200 anyway is going to be the long-term capital gain from sale of bonus shares. So the total long-term capital gain is how much? 1,04,325. Let us leave it there. We don't know whether it is listed or not listed, etc. We'll come to the taxability of this long-term capital gains later. If it is listed, then up to 1 lakh rupees nothing is taxable. That means taxable long-term capital gain will be only 4,325. As of now, since we don't know that provision, we don't need to apply that. Just computation wise, you can stop there. Just compute capital gain, that's all. Is it the taxable capital gain? No, just capital gain. Taxable capital gain is different. Taxable capital gain will be only 4,325. That's it. Next, question number 21. This is the typical question that can be expected in the examinations. Many times such questions were asked earlier also. Shares based questions are quite popular in this chapter. Read that carefully. A purchased 1,000 listed equity shares. Listed is given very clearly. and of 10 rupees each at 100 rupees per share from a broker on 4th May 2014. Okay, and he paid 3000 rupees as brokerage. What should we do with that? That should be added to the cost of acquisition. When you are purchasing, the brokerage paid should be added to the cost of acquisition. People will not read it carefully. Brokerage means they will consider it as expenses in connection with transfer, going by name without reading it properly. When he paid brokerage, that you have to see. When he purchased, he paid brokerage. How can it be expenses in connection with transfer? Transfer is sale. We are talking purchase now. So what should we do now? We should consider the original cost of acquisition of 1000 listed equity shares at the rate of 100. Face value is completely immaterial here. We should just ignore that. 10 rupees is useless. Purchase price is important. So 1 lakh plus 3000. So what is the cost of acquisition of these shares originally? 1 lakh 3000. Then on 15th March 2019, that is not our previous year, that is 18-19 previous year, he was given a bonus shares by the company on the basis of 1 share for every 2 shares held. Not necessarily the numbers will be given always. We have to find out sometimes. 1 share for every 2 shares held means how many number of bonus shares would have been issued? 500 bonus shares would have been issued. And story is not over. On the same date, he was also given a right to acquire 1000 right shares at the rate of 90 rupees per share. Rights issue price was 90 rupees. Right was given for 1:1, we can say, because he already has 1000. Bonus also happened on the same day, so that will not be included in rights. So whatever it is, he was given a right to acquire 1000 shares at the rate of 90 per share. He acquired 50% of the right shares offered and sold the remaining 50% of the right entitlement for a sum of 67,500 rupees on 7th April 2019. That is our previous year, naturally. Then the rights shares were allotted to him on 30th April 2019. All shares held by him were sold on 24th September 2019 at 280 rupees per share through a recognized stock exchange. Compute capital gain. Perfect question. And even actually this can be coupled with also compute the tax payable if any, assuming he doesn't have any other income. But the other part will come to it later. For this particular purpose, let us stick to computation of capital gain rather than taxability of it or tax liability arising from it. We will come to that later at the end of this chapter. Right now, what are the types of shares and what are the types of assets that this SSE has? As usual, you need to have different columns. So let us first take original shares, then bonus shares, then right shares, but it's not over. Even rights entitlement is also a capital asset. That is also taxable under the head of capital gains. Rights entitlement also. First, let us take full value of consideration carefully for each of them. Of course, each of the shares is sold at 280 rupees per share. Prior to that, you can have the number of shares on the top of it so that it will be clear. How many shares are originally there? 1000. Bonus shares are 500. For that, you can show a working note 1:2. Then right shares 500 because he acquired only 500 of the half of the rights that he has only. Rights entitlement we don't care. Why? Because how much money he received, that only matters. How much money he received? 67,500. If he has given per entitlement, then 500 would have mattered. Right now, because already the sum is given, 67,500 is the full value of consideration for rights entitlement sale. Remaining all are sold at 280 rupees per share. So simply take 280 multiplied with 1000, 2,80,000. 500 means naturally 1,40,000 and 1,40,000. This is the full value of consideration of sale. Sale this is. Now we have to take one by one what is the cost of acquisition or indexed cost of acquisition or whatever it may be. So first let us take indexed cost of acquisition for original shares. You can show the calculation separately also or you can show it here itself. Both are okay because anyway it's a small calculation, you can show here itself. Original shares were purchased for how much? As we have earlier discussed, 1,03,000, not 1 lakh. Brokerage paid should be added to the cost of acquisition. So 1,03,000 was the original purchase price of the shares. into 289 is okay, no problem. Divided by what? Divided by what is the year of acquisition? 4th May 2014 means 2014-15 year. 2014-15 year means 240 is the CII for that year. 2014-15. Calculate that. 1,03,000 into 289 divided by 240. So 1,24,029 rupees we can say is the indexed cost of acquisition. So what is the resultant here? Or we can do that later. First let us say indexed cost of acquisition is that much. What about bonus shares? Bonus shares cost of acquisition is always nil. So nil only. Then what about rights shares? Rights shares, you have to see the date. When the rights were allotted to him, 30th April 2019. And those are sold on 24th September 2019, which means those are short-term capital assets. Those are not eligible for indexation. Those are eligible for only direct deduction as cost of acquisition, not indexed cost of acquisition. So whether it is indexed or normal, nil is nil. So don't worry about bonus shares. As far as right shares is concerned, it is a cost of acquisition only. Or you can do like this also, cost of acquisition or indexed cost of acquisition. That is the best way rather than again showing everything. So cost of acquisition or indexed cost of acquisition. We have indexed cost of acquisition 124,029 for original shares, nil for bonus shares, and how much is going to be the cost of acquisition for right shares, that you can calculate. 500 shares into 90 rupees, right? 500 shares into what was the issue price? 90 rupees per share. So 45,000 is the normal cost of acquisition, no indexation. And once again, the cost of acquisition for rights entitlement should be taken as nil. This is also nil. Now show the calculations. What is the resultant? So 2,80,000 minus 124,029, 1,55,971. What is that? You should clearly write. What is that? Long-term capital gain. Of course, in that 1 lakh will be exempt because it is sold in a recognized stock exchange. We will come to that later. What about this 1,40,000 bonus shares? That also you have to look at period of holding, when the bonus shares were allotted. 15th March 2019 and sold in 24th September 2019, not even 12 months finished. That means this is a short-term capital gain, 1,40,000. And what about this? Rights, definitely short-term capital gain. That will be how much? 95,000. This is also short-term capital gain. 67,500 obviously short-term capital gain. Always it will be, because there will not be too much time when the right is acquired and the right is renounced. Years and years time will not be there. So naturally, almost always it will be short-term capital gain only. That is the sale of rights entitlement. So there is one long-term capital gain and all others are short-term capital gains. That's all. Leave it there. We don't need to total them and show that how much is taxable and all. That we will come to know only when we reach to that level of understanding taxability of these items. That we will do later. Right now, computational aspects are enough. How to compute capital gains? This is how we have to compute capital gains in case of right shares, original shares, bonus shares and rights entitlement. A perfect question like this can very well be expected. Now moving on further to some other provisions. What if a capital asset is transferred by a partner or a member to a firm or AOP or BOI? So who is a transferor? Partner or a member of firm or AOP or BOI? Partner of a firm, member of AOP or BOI. Forget about AOP, BOI for some time. Let us call partner and firm. That is quite a normal relationship that we generally see. So what if a partner has transferred a capital asset to the firm? Is it a transfer? Yes, it is a transfer. It is a transfer. There is no exception for that. If you remember, the transactions not regarded as transfer in section 47, there is no mention about it. That means it is a transfer. It is taxable in the hands of the transferor, naturally. Who is that? The partner or the member. And main point is, he may or may not receive any money. Whatever money he receives, we don't care. What is the full value of consideration? This is very important in this particular point. Full value of consideration will be the amount recorded in the books of the firm. Whatever the consideration that partner actually receives, we don't care. According to 45.3, full value of consideration should be taken as whatever the amount that is recorded in the books of the firm. Why is that? Because the people can claim anything. People can say we received only less amount, because partner and firm, legally though they are different SSEs and different organizations or entities, we can say, but still effectively more or less they are the same. So what the people can do, instead of selling an asset directly to somebody, they may create a partnership firm in between. First they will transfer this asset to the partnership firm, right? And while doing that first transfer, they will say, I have transferred this asset to my firm only because I am a partner there. I am contributing it as my capital, whatever. So there may not be any capital gain, because if this provision is not there, don't think it is all possible. Because this provision is there, all these things we are talking about are not possible. If this is not there, this is what people will do. They will say a partner has transferred some amount to the partnership firm, some asset to the partnership firm as capital contribution. Partner did not receive any money, so nothing will be taxable for him. The firm will record this particular asset at a value which is very high. Let us say actual value of the asset is 10 lakhs rupees, and the firm may record this asset at 15 lakhs rupees. Firm will pass a simple entry, asset account at R to partner's capital account, 15 lakhs rupees. And then what the firm will do, that will sell to other person, let us say Y. X was the person who is a partner of the firm, who contributed this asset to the firm and did not pay any capital gain tax because we did not receive any money from the firm. But firm will sell this asset to Y at only 10 lakhs rupees, and firm will show that I incurred a loss of 5 lakhs rupees. By what? Just by passing a book entry at whatever the value they wanted to write or record in the books of the firm. So in order to avoid this provision has been brought. Whatever the real consideration that the partner receives from the firm, we don't care. Whether he receives any consideration or not, whether it is by way of a capital contribution, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Whatever the amount recorded in the books of the firm itself will be treated as full value of consideration for the partner, and immediately that becomes taxable in the hands of the partner. Maybe imagine if it is a actual real genuine transaction also, where he has capital contributed an asset. So he has to pay capital gain tax on something, money for which he did not even receive. So that's like a kind of discouragement for such transactions. Because of this provision, don't think this transaction will happen. It will never happen. Why? Because this provision itself prohibits almost that transaction by way of taxing something in the hands of partner for an amount that he did not even receive, because he did not actually receive any consideration from the firm, but still he has to pay the tax. So that is unfair. Yes, it is. But why such unfair provision is given? To prevent very much more unfair practices that people might resort to. That is why the full value of consideration in case of a transfer of a capital asset by a partner to the firm shall be taken as whatever the amount that is recorded in the books of the firm. That is about section 45.3. Now, other side of this coin. What about the dissolution of the firm that is happening? Firm is dissolved and firm is distributing the assets to partners. Then what? Then naturally, who is the transferor? Firm is a transferor. Is that not a transfer? It is a transfer. Transfer of capital assets by a company upon its liquidation is not a transfer. But nobody said about partnership firm. That means it is a transfer, it is taxable. In whose hands? Transferor. Who is the transferor? Naturally, the firm or AOP or BY. Then it is taxable in the hands of the firm or AOP or BY. Then what is the full value of consideration? That shall be the fair market value of the asset on the date of dissolution. That is the other side of the coin. While the partner contributes the asset to the firm, whatever amount is recorded in the books of accounts of the firm will be taken as full value of consideration. When the firm distributes assets to the partners upon its dissolution, then fair market value of the asset on the date of dissolution will be considered as full value of consideration in the hands of the firm. But you have to understand 45.3 SSE was a partner, 45.4 SSE is the partnership firm, or AOP or BOI, like that. So that is about some other special transactions that might happen, and questions can be asked on this, mostly small questions like MCQ type questions. But 45.5 is another important one, capital gain on compulsory acquisition of the assets. Compulsory acquisition of the assets under section 45.5. So 45.3, 45.4, 45.5, all of them are in sequence that we are looking at. 45.3 is about partner transferring assets to the firm. 45.4 is about partnership firm distributing assets to partner upon dissolution. And 45.5 is compulsory acquisition. This has nothing to do with firm and all. Who can do compulsory acquisition? Only government. If somebody else does compulsory acquisition, that is called kabja. That is illegal. We are not talking about that. We are talking about assets which are compulsorily acquired under any law. Means government will generally do this compulsory acquisition. Then, what is the variety? Nothing special. Same like earlier, like conversion of capital asset into stock and trade, or insurance claim. Both of them, and this also logically same. What is that? Capital gain here will be taxable in the year in which such compensation or part thereof is first received by the SSE. So whenever the compensation is actually received by the SSE, then only this capital gain on compulsory acquisition of the asset will be taxable. In such year in which the compensation or part thereof is first received by the SSE. That is the point here. Means what? Transfer might happen in 1 year in which the compulsory acquisition actually happened, but taxability might arise in another year in which the compensation is first received by the SSE. Even if it is received partly also, it will be taxable. However, subsequently, if any increased compensation is received, we can also call it as enhanced compensation. Then also same, it shall be taxable in the year in which such amount is received, fully received. And main point here is, for increased compensation, cost of acquisition, cost of improvement shall be taken as nil, because already when original compensation was received, capital gains was already calculated. Deduction in relation to COA and COI was already taken. There is no fresh deduction that can be claimed from enhanced compensation or increased compensation, which means what? Entire amount of increased compensation shall be taxable as capital gain. However, any expenses incurred on realization of increased compensation may be deducted as expenses, like lawyer fees, etc., court fees, legal expenses will be incurred. Can they be deducted? Yes, those can be deducted from enhanced compensation or increased compensation as expenses. And one more point, though it is not much relevant, once again, because of MCQs we cannot leave anything. That is why we have to keep watch on each and every smaller point also. What if a person dies before the receipt of enhanced compensation? No problem. It shall become taxable in the hands of the legal heirs, but not under the head of capital gains. That will be taxable under income from other sources. That is the variety point. Why? Because the asset was not transferred by the SSE, it was transferred by somebody earlier. Now, because that somebody, the SSE originally has died, the legal heirs will have to be paying tax on that enhanced compensation that is received, but of course not under the head of capital gains, but under income from other sources. That is another story. But normal story is, asset is acquired compulsorily by the government under any law, and in that case, year of acquisition is year of transfer, no doubt. Calculation should happen for that year, but taxability will arise only in the year in which the asset SSE first receives the compensation. Subsequently, when any increased compensation is received, that will be taxable in the year of receipt of such compensation. For increased compensation, cost of acquisition, cost of improvement will be nil. Of course, the expenses related to obtaining or incurring, realizing the increased compensation can be claimed as deduction. That's all. Now, one exemption is there in the part of compulsory acquisition related scenario, that is section 10 subsection 37. Basically, this is related to transfer of urban agricultural land. Urban agricultural land not sold It is compulsorily acquired. If there is any income arising from the transfer of urban agricultural land, it shall be exempt in the hands of individual or HUF only, not for any other SSC, only for individual or HUF. But point to be once again noted, urban agricultural land. So why not rural agricultural land? Because rural agricultural land is not even a capital asset. When it is not a capital asset, there is no taxability at all. When there is no taxability at all, there is no point of giving an exemption for it separately. Already it is excluded from the purview of capital gains. So there is no need of any exemption for rural agricultural land, so leave it. Only urban agricultural land when it is compulsorily acquired by the government under any law, and that is definitely agricultural land. How can we prove that? If such land was used for agricultural purposes by such individual or HUF or his parents, at least 2 years immediately preceding the date of transfer. That's a very weird condition, naturally, because everybody will say that I have done agriculture. Can you go back and see whether they really did the agriculture or not? So if there is an urban land which is agricultural purposes on records, that's it. Whether it is really used for agricultural purposes and all, there is no time machine for us to go back and see whether they did it or not. They will claim it. If they claim it, then exemption is there for them. But they have to prove that it is an agricultural land which has been used for agricultural purposes. And most importantly, here the exemption is applicable only when the compensation is fixed or approved by central government or RBI. So, if the compensation is fixed by state government, then this exemption is not available. Only if the compensation is fixed by or approved by central government or RBI, then only this exemption is applicable. So, rural agricultural land transfer anyway not taxable because it is not even a capital asset. Urban agricultural land also is not taxable if it is compulsorily acquired and such compensation is approved by the central government or RBI. So, that is the provision related to section 1037, which is exemption of compensation received by way of transferring or compulsory acquisition of urban agricultural land. That's it. That is capital gains related to compulsory acquisition of asset under section 45(5). Let us do a couple of more questions which are related to this application of section 45(5). Exercise number 22. X purchased land for 3 lakhs rupees on 8/8/2005. On 6/6/2017, the property is compulsorily acquired by the government and has been awarded a compensation of 25 lakhs. On 9/9/2019, he received first installment of 6 lakhs. Compute capital gain. Of course, even if he received part of the compensation, it will be taxable in the assessment year in which it is received, first received, that is 2020-21. But once again, you have to be careful. Calculations have to be done for the year of transfer only. Taxability arises in a different year. Transfer happened in a different year. But calculations have nothing to do with taxability. Calculations are related to the year of transfer. When the transfer happened, what was the full value of compensation or full value of consideration? 25 lakhs. Though it is not received, still it is taxable. Can't help it. Then, indexed cost of acquisition. Indexed cost of acquisition, how much? That is 3 lakhs rupees original cost of acquisition. Okay, fine. Multiplied with main point. Numerator will not be same. Numerator will be the year of transfer. When it was compulsorily acquired by the government, 6/6/2017. 6/6/2017 it was compulsorily acquired, which means 2017-18 was the year of transfer. That means 272 is the numerator. Year of acquisition was how much? Year of acquisition was 8/8/2005. That means 2005-6. That means 117 is the index, inflation index, cost inflation index. 3 lakhs into 272 divided by 117. So calculation will give us how much? 6,97,436. So 25 lakhs minus that, 18 lakhs 2,564 is naturally the long term capital gain, taxable in the assessment year 2020-21. So that is the point to be noted. 18 lakhs 2,564 is the taxable long term capital gain. Though it is not fully received, even if it is partly received also, it will be taxable in the year of first receipt of such compensation. So that is one of the applications of compulsory acquisition. Now, move to exercise number 23. X has a plot of land acquired on 7777 for 1 lakh. Market value of the property on 1/4/2001 was 6 lakhs. That will be more relevant naturally. On 6/12/2015, the land was compulsorily acquired by the government and compensation awarded was 15 lakhs. First installment of the compensation received on 15th of December 2015 itself, and balance on 9/9/2018. We don't care. Whenever it is first received, that will be taxable then only. Being dissatisfied with the amount of compensation, SSC filed a suit, and on 10/1/2020, that is our previous year, he has been awarded an enhanced compensation of 9 lakhs. Expenditure incurred to get the enhanced compensation is 1 lakh. Enhanced compensation is received on 3/3/2020. State the tax treatment. Good question. Such type of questions can be expected. Even MCQs also, they will just give calculations only, facility, state, comment and all will not be there in MCQs. But calculations definitely have to be done. Which year this original compensation would be taxable? In the year of receipt of compensation. But in this case, if you observe, compensation awarded also in 2015-16, received also, first received also in 2015-16. So 15-16 itself will be the previous year for which this taxability will arise. Naturally, assessment year 2016-17 will be the year in which original compensation would have been taxable. Let us first calculate that. How much was the compensation that was awarded? 15 lakhs minus indexed cost of acquisition 6 lakhs, because asset was acquired before 1/4/2001. We are taking fair market value on 1/4/2001 multiplied with, carefully, previous year 15-16 means what is the numerator? 15-16, that is 254 divided by, because the asset was acquired prior to 1/4/2001, naturally you can take 100. So what is the indexed cost of acquisition? 6 lakhs into 254 by 100. That comes to 15 lakhs 24,000, which means there is a loss. How much is that? Long-term capital loss of 24,000 in the assessment year 2016-17. That story is over. That is long-term capital loss in that year. Now, after that, he has gone to court and received 9 lakhs rupees compensation during our previous year. And because there are expenses in obtaining that compensation of 1 lakh, that can be deducted, but there is no other cost of acquisition and all. So there will be 8 lakhs. That will be capital gain. Question comes whether this is long-term capital gain or short-term capital gain. That is also another important point to be noted. Whatever the nature of original compensation is, long-term or short-term, that will be the nature of enhanced compensation also. If original is short-term, this also will be short-term, even if it is received after 25 years. If original is long-term, this also will be long-term. So there is no separate nature for the enhanced compensation. Whatever the nature of original compensation is, the same will be the nature of enhanced compensation also. Since original is long-term, this is also long-term. Of course, it was a loss, this is a gain. That's fine. But both are having a nature of long-term capital gain or loss only. That is about question number or exercise number 23. With that, we can conclude today's session with some of the special transactions. 3 of them are very crucial. Of course, all of them were discussed earlier in a nutshell, because all of them are having one common point. Year of transfer and year of taxability need not be same. One is insurance related claims. Second one is conversion of capital asset into stock in trade. Third one is compulsory acquisition of assets and compensation received or enhanced compensation received. In addition to these main items, where there is an exception to section 45(1), also we discussed about shares related questions, particularly bonus shares, rights shares, how to treat rights shares acquisition, as well as how to compute the capital gains on the selling of rights shares. Not only shares, rights entitlement is also another important point that we discussed in today's class. And in the next session, we'll continue this discussion with some more crucial provisions related to the capital gains topic. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Thank you very much.